Lisa,
Yes, baby girl.
when I grow up, I want to be a WOMENACE to society.
Then so shall you be.
Hey, this is Lisa Landry. Welcome back to WOMENACE to Society. I'm stoked today to speak with my friend. She was here last year and she's returned to the podcast so graciously. Welcome back, Melanie Blow of Stop Abuse Campaign.
It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Lisa, for having me.
So it's been a year about since you and I last spoke. What is going on in Pennsylvania? That's one of your biggest chapters, right? You have a Stop Abuse Campaign chapter in Pennsylvania?
Yes, it is.
And that seems to be a hotbed right now with some children abusers being exposed.
Yes, it is. The big news right now is that the Pennsylvania grand jury report against the Catholic diocese throughout the state of Pennsylvania has been released, despite many legal maneuvers by the church to keep it silenced. And this document has exposed over 1,000 child sexual abuse victims, over 300 adults who either committed abuse or helped protect abusers, and not one of these victims is eligible for their day in court due to the statute of limitations on the crime.
What is the statute of limitations in Pennsylvania for child sexual abuse?
For child sex abuse, it's the victim's 30th birthday.
So you only have until you turn 30 to report.
Correct.
And
Correct.
most people don't really report or deal with these situations until later in life, right? Statistically?
Correct.
So they've set it up so that you really can't get justice.
Right, exactly. And this is something most people don't realize, because when we do see something about child sexual abuse on TV, it usually is in connection to a current case. Some kids do disclose when they're children. Thank goodness. Otherwise, we would never be able to prosecute any of these people. But most victims do not disclose until they're an adult, or if they do disclose when they're a child, and this is another bitter pill to swallow, but statistically, a lot of adults don't do the right thing. Most victims don't disclose till they're middle-aged. One study has said it takes about 21-point-something years. Some studies even show longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
That's average. So for every victim who's in their 30s and 40s who discloses, there might be another who's in their 60s, offset by someone who discloses when they're still a child.
Wow. So how did all this come to public attention?
Pennsylvania's got some good people there. A good attorney general. They've got people who are just very victim-centered and wanted to bring some exposure to this and give victims some degree of closure and some degree of validation, even though they couldn't take their cases to trial because of the statute of limitations.
Do you think this will make the statute of limitations in Pennsylvania be approached in a different light going forward? You think they'll reform?
I hope so, and I think so. Pennsylvania's been active in trying to reform their statute of limitations for years now, and we're hoping this is going to be the push that is needed. The biggest opponent to statute of limitations reform has been the Catholic Church, because they don't want their misdeeds to become public, and they don't want to pay victims. So they've been fighting very, very hard. And, the more moral authority the church has to any individual politician, the harder it's going to be to go against them. It seems like this Attorney General's report is kind of shattering the church's moral authority to a lot of people. And I'm not going to say that's good in all contexts, but it certainly is useful in this. I think when you spend millions of dollars and huge amounts of time and effort fighting to keep sex abuse survivors from having a day in court, and fighting to keep people who sexually abuse children above the law, I think your moral authority should be questioned.
Yeah, it seems kind of antichrist to me.
Yeah, me too.
And no knock on the Catholic Church. I went to Catholic Church. I made my first communion in the Catholic Church. And I'm from New Orleans, which is a very Catholic-centered city. Like, even our days off for school in secular school were Catholic holidays. So we could all just stay home as a city, after Mardi Gras and stuff like that, and Halloween.
Yeah.
But, there's obviously a problem that doesn't get better. It just gets pushed aside more and more. And I did think about you when the New York Times released an article about how the Vatican and the Catholic Church stops SOL reform. Because you told me that. I didn't know that before.
Yeah.
So this organization puts all this money into blocking not just victims of priests or nuns or whomever is Catholic, but in general.
Right.
They're affecting everybody who has been victimized as a child.
Right, exactly. And child sex abuse by clergy only represents a very small percentage of child sex abuse overall.
Sure.
But yeah, the Catholic Church is fighting to keep not just their own abusers above the law, but all of them above the law.
So that's just feeding rape culture, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So this Attorney General Shapiro, right? That's his name in Pennsylvania? He does seem like he's walking a very respectful line, like not making this all about the horrible Catholic Church, but more about this horrible problem we have with children being harmed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you see that letter from Vigano?
Yes.
Detailing McCarrick and about how the Pope knew all about McCarrick?
Yep.
How do you think this is going to play out?
It's really interesting. It's going to really, I think, be a litmus test for how far our society has come in a relatively short amount of time when it comes to this issue. But just the fact that it's getting the attention it's getting is huge. I mean, if the Pope resigns over this, and people are calling for that, and I don't know the inner workings of this well enough to have, I'm not willing to place a bet on whether or not that's going to happen. But just the fact that people are talking about it, I think, is amazing. I mean, child sexual abuse has been going on forever. We know that. We know that 20% of people who are born in America, who were born in the 1930s, the 1940s, and the 1950s, were sexually abused as children.
How do you get that stat? I'm just wondering. I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
That was actually one of the things about the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which was conducted in the early 90s, concluded. It was conducted on middle-aged adults. Originally, they did this in San Diego County, which is a pretty nice place to live.
Right.
And people who were doing well enough in their life that they had health insurance. So, pretty good piece of society here. And basically, one of the things that that study revealed about child sex abuse is that if you ask people about it, especially people who are middle-aged, a lot of the time people will answer, and will answer honestly. People who were in their 40s, 50s, and 60s back in the 1990s were born in the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s, which shows that this is not new. This has been going on in our culture for a long time. This is not a product of the internet. This is not a product of feminism. This is not a product of any of the things we typically like to blame it on. This has been going on for a long time. What's different now is that we talk about it. Clinicians didn't realize how bad child sexual abuse was 40 years ago, 30 years ago. We've learned a lot in a fairly short amount of time. It feels like a long time for an individual, but for a society, for bodies of learning, for the people who write medical textbooks and psychology textbooks and things like that, it's actually pretty recent. So we are learning a lot about this, something that 40 years ago there was huge cultural ignorance about. We're not as ignorant anymore.
Do you think that's because we talk more, people are more open, or do you think it's because more women, more younger people are coming into medical field, psychology, and that kind of stuff, or what?
I think it's both, honestly. I think it is that we have started talking about it, maybe not entirely in the right ways, maybe not as much as we should.
Right.
But I think that's part of it. And that has emboldened the women who enter those fields to keep talking about it. And it's gotten people who are a little bit more comfortable talking about it into those fields. So yeah, I think it's both of those.
Well, there's always room for improvement, right? Like, remember
Absolutely.
Larry Nasser? Is that how you say his name?
Yep.
And like
yeah.
all those staff members who could have made a difference, and all those women who could have made a difference. See, I get super PO'd when it's a woman who has the ability to put her foot down and make make good changes happen, and she goes along with the predator. And
Right.
you see that so often.
Oh, yeah. I mean, growing up in a family where child sexual abuse happened, I know how it works. We all become, when we make mistakes, we all become that 7-year-old who broke mom's vase, and you don't want to fess up to mom and get yourself in trouble. So you use duct tape or whatever, or crazy glue, and try to put it back together and hope no one's going to notice.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same mentality. When somebody realizes this, when somebody that you know, somebody you work with, somebody who employs you, somebody who you care about, be it a parent or a partner or a sibling or whatever, somebody who you are vested in is accused of doing these things, it's hard to believe because, oh my goodness, if this person, if this colleague of mine, this person who's my boss, this person who is my parent, my sibling, my partner, if they're actually doing this, well then I'm a bad person. I made a mistake. There's that internal conflict. Nobody wants to fess up to that.
Guilt.
And so, yeah, guilt and lots of different kinds of it. Nobody wants to deal with that. So people make the choice to either dismiss what the victim is saying or to cover their own tracks or to do the right thing. And I mean, some people do ultimately do the right thing. It's tough. And the more you decide to cover your tracks to protect this person, then the more committed you become to doing that in the future. Individuals have a very limited amount that they can do about that. Bigger institutions have more resources that they can put into covering tracks. The Catholic Church is the biggest institution in the world. They are the wealthiest institution in the world. They have just about unlimited resources that they can pour into covering their tracks and even into gaming political systems. And that's what they're doing right now. And that's why the magnitude of the scandal is just so unparalleled in the church as opposed to every place else, even though a whole lot of other places do the same thing.
Right. Yeah, it's not just the Catholic Church, obviously, perpetrating these acts. Yeah.
Right.
Totally not. But it does seem like it's coming out from all ends at this point. It's like Nebraska has a story coming out now, and Pennsylvania's going to have more, I know, because their attorney general is asking people to call in and report even if they can't.
And they've gotten, I guess, thousands of reports.
Yeah. I mean, he's doing a great job as far as an actual lawyer who's in charge of stuff, acting like an adult.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like there's that many adults in these situations. Like, these children need to be protected. Obviously, they can't protect themselves, which is why they're preyed upon. Well, there's probably other reasons, too, because people are creepy and messed up. But where are the grown folk in this country, in this world? Where are the grown-ups?
They're back in that mindset of, the 8-year-old who broke mom's vase. And they're making that decision every single day about, do I stay there or do I become an adult? Do I do the right thing?
Well, it would seem if more people would rise up and be grown-ups, we'd have less of this happening. And if you, and don't these places, forgive me because I don't know corporate America very well, don't they have lawyers, don't they have HR departments that they could go to and say, I have this situation with this physician or this coworker doing this, and have some resolve if you have 3 or 4 people go together to speak to a supervisor, to be like, this guy needs to be off our staff. He should probably be in a police room right now being questioned?
Well, it depends on the institution. And this is another kind of insidious thing that happens when you have statutes of limitations that keep most, not only bad people, but institutions that behave badly above the law. Institutions usually aren't terribly forward-thinking about these sorts of things. And what makes them a lot more forward-thinking is when they've gotten sued. Or when their neighbor has gotten sued. If the daycare next to you, across the street from your daycare, gets sued for a huge sum of money because they've had a child was sexually abused there by staff, well, you're going to get scared and you're going to start to think, how do we keep this from happening? And your insurance company, because all institutions that work with kids have insurance, your insurance company is very likely to send you a letter that says, hey, you need to do some stuff or we're not going to insure you anymore. And you need to implement certain policies for prevention, and you need to implement certain policies for reporting. And that's where the kind of stuff you're talking about comes in. When institutions are thinking about this, there are policies for reporting, and there are policies for protecting whistleblowers that can be implemented, and if they're violated, then that is a lawsuit, and possibly even criminal action. But they need to be in place first, and nobody wants to think about that because it's icky, and it's, oh, I would never do that, this place would never hire a sex offender. Well, that's what everybody says.
But do you think that we're becoming more woke about the fact that this is rampant? Like, because you don't want to be an alarmist, and you don't want to be somebody who's thinking everybody wants to touch your child, or everybody is creepy around your kid or those kids or whatever. But truly, this is a monumental problem that we're not dealing with because we're not being realistic, or we haven't been as realistic. Yeah. But now we're kind of waking up, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. We still have a long way to go, but yeah, we are.
You were mentioning about how the Vatican, the Catholic Church, games the political system to keep their representatives voting against SOL reform, or to keep stuff out of the press. It seems like that's shifted now. It seems like that might be over. Even the Pope coming out talking about plastic in the ocean the other day, I think people were just like, wait a minute, you have some other priorities on your plate there, Papa.
Yeah. Well, I don't expect that the church is going to stop. I actually expect the church is going to keep trying even harder.
You think they're going to double down?
I do. That's what my bet is going to be.
Too many men in charge.
It's like,
just keep lying. We'll get through it.
Well, yeah, exactly. They don't want this to happen, and they're just going to keep fighting. The church has been kind of slow to kind of grasp cultural changes, to put it mildly, and to grasp changing cultural sensibilities.
Well, they still don't even have female priests. I mean,
right.
That'd be half your battle right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Where I do think that their grip is going to be loosening is politicians, I think, are going to be less likely to be standing with the Catholic Church and saying, I agree with them because I don't want churches to get closed down. I think that argument is going to be less appealing right now than it used to be even a year ago.
You know what bummed me out? I noticed that there was, I think it was an op-ed piece in the New York Times, but basically the headline was something about conservatives are going off on the church. Like, they're trying to make... Did you see that? Like, I'm not a conservative person. I don't have hatred toward conservative people, but I'm not a conservative. How dare you make this a left or right issue? And try to make it seem like if people are going or are really upset about what the Vatican is doing and covering up these crimes, still, how does that have to be a right or left issue? Why can't that just be a human, we need to take care of our children issue?
Yeah, I agree. This should be the most bipartisan issue on the planet. Unfortunately, it isn't, but it should be. And with children's issues in general, it's kind of funny. And you will see, for the most part, especially up until very recently, it was a lot more bipartisan than it used to be. Statute of Limitations Reform gets really ugly, and that does tend to become a very left versus right issue.
Why? Is it because of the representatives attached to these movements?
Yeah, basically it's because it's relied entirely on the moral authority of the church, and the left has been the ones to say, we support the church, we're all, the church is great, we support their moral authority, we support what they stand for. And the right's been a lot more reluctant to be seen that way. And in New York, statute of limitations reform has been going on for 13 years.
Right.
13 years ago, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, it would have been a lot easier for people to break ranks and say, I don't care what my conference leader says, I support this. But now they've kind of painted themselves into a corner.
Oh, so they can't go along with the other team.
Right.
That's messed up. Again, where are the adults? Where are the grown folk?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's something, everyone needs to think about in November when they're voting,
Speaking of voting, I know you didn't vote for President Trump. I didn't vote for him either. But he did sign that executive order into effect that basically said if you are caught doing human rights violations, like egregious acts against humanity, and you do business here in America, America can seize your assets and you will forfeit your monies to us. Do you think he's going to go after the Catholic Church?
I doubt it, but that would be a really interesting application of it.
Wouldn't it?
It would be. I mean, that would be a very interesting application of it. I mean, I know that in Pennsylvania, the Attorney General has tried going after the church on RICO, on racketeering law. I know, and I've worked with people who worked very closely with the Attorney General. I know some of the victims who were mentioned in the Attorney General's report. And they asked about that, and they just said, the definitions, the actual legal definitions for racketeering are very, very specific. And as much as they've looked at them, they don't quite meet the criteria, just by a very small margin, but they don't quite meet it.
They found a loophole?
Yeah, basically.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it all turns out. I feel very bad for Catholics who are like diehard, super religious Catholic people right now,
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things about the Catholic faith that are very beautiful, and I really do like. And I don't think most Catholics are bad people.
No.
I don't think most Catholics, by any matter of means, agree with what their church is doing.
No.
But you do need to somewhere along the line say, I'm not the one who's telling the church to do this. I'm not the one who is okay with the church doing this. But if you give that church money, you are financing them. You are enabling them to do this. And, that is something to think about.
Yeah. Plus, I wouldn't leave my kids with a priest.
Yeah, I certainly would not recommend that.
Which, and that's very sad, too, because, if you're going there for spiritual guidance, you want to have that relationship where you're not afraid that your kids are going to be harmed. But, yeah, it's got to be tough to be a Catholic right now.
Yeah, I certainly think so, and I certainly do have a lot of sympathy for them. I mean, the Catholic Church has taken on a lot of really great, wonderful, progressive issues in the last... I don't even know when.
Since Francis. Yeah, Francis. Pope Francis has been very progressive on many social issues.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out and how this affects SOL reform in Pennsylvania especially. And maybe it'll start in Pennsylvania and other SOL reform movements will happen in various states because of this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think so. States all over the country right now are pushing their attorney generals to start investigating.
Oh, good.
I know that in New York they're pushing very hard for this. And this is an election year, so New York is going to get a new attorney general no matter what this year. And that was a question a newspaper asked all of the attorney general candidates. And all of them said they would support this. And Minnesota, which has had SOL reform fairly recently and has had just massive issues with, there was a lot of lawsuits, a lot came to light. The church was trying to hide like $100 million.
Wow.
Oh yeah. To keep it from being payable to victims and stuff like that. But now Minnesota is pushing for an attorney general investigation. And states all over the country are doing this. The issue isn't going to go away, and it's not going to disappear from the headlines. And that's good.
That is good. I want to thank you because I know you work tirelessly, and I'm a huge fan. I think you're brilliant and wonderful and compassionate and smart. And I know that a lot of this stuff that is coming down the pike it's coming because of you and your organization and people who work tirelessly on behalf of others. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for saying that. It's always appreciated.
Stop Abuse Campaign. How do we find you?
StopAbuseCampaign.org.
Thanks again, Melanie Blow. I know you work tirelessly for others, and I really appreciate you. Thanks for listening, y'all. Please join me at lisalandry.com. If you connect with me at my YouTube channel, that means subscribe, please. You will have advance notice of when each new podcast drops every WOMENACE Wednesday. Shout out Ari Bear. I love you so much. There are some abusive people out there in the world, but you know what? There are a lot of wonderful people too, and they have healing hugs. I got one for you myself, son.